Well, hello and welcome to another Crystal Confab. This week we have a slightly different kind of rock and a slightly different lineup of folks to confab about it. So, of course, I'm joined by Adam and Kyle, and this week we have our lovely guest, Gemma Petherbridge, who's joining us from kind of halfway between where us boys are over in the UK. And we're going to be talking about Scolecite. So, in true Nicholas fashion, I'm going to talk a little bit about the geology of Scolecite, but I want to widen this angle a little bit and talk about the zeolite family as a whole, because I think it's really misunderstood by us Healy-Feely types, and it can help us kind of understand exactly what's happening with the energy of Scolecite. So, Scolecite is part of this smaller umbrella that we call the Natrolite group, which has very few members, only about five. And Scolecite is one of the end members of a series where we can start with some sodium and end with some calcium and get something kind of in the middle. And that gives us, respectively, Natrolite on one end, Scolecite on the other, and Mesolite in the middle. There are a couple of others in this group. There's Gonardite, there's Paranatrolite. I think there might be one more. And that makes it seem like it's pretty nice and easy to define our zeolites, but it's actually a really large mineral family. Compare the zeolite group to the garnet group or the tourmaline family, and those might have some complex chemistries, but they still fit into nice, neat little orderly packages. We actually have more than 115 verified species of zeolites, including a few that have yet to be named because they are
Mm.
relatively new in the geological scene. And this results in a very complex conversation. And so we're going to kind of simplify. We're going to talk about zeolites at a really high level. Zeolites are framework silicates, or what we call tectosilicates. Structurally, quartz fits into this same category. So we end up with those little kind of pyramidal groups of silica tetrahedra that form a hollow framework. And they're usually aluminosilicates, like a lot of our feldspars are going to be. Although we've had to alter that definition. Sometimes that aluminum is substituted for other things like zinc or cesium or other fun stuff. And this kind of hollow framework structure gives zeolites a handful of really interesting physical and structural properties that also carry over into their kind of chemical and naturally their energetic properties. So because they're hollow frameworks, they have really high surface area. And there's also these inner channels, these kind of openings, vacuities inside their structures where other stuff can just kind of hang out. Now, usually that other stuff is water. Um, and there's a really uniform pore size. So they've got these little micro pores, the openings in the framework silica of it. And so that water can get inside. They're pretty stable in at least low to moderate hydrothermal environments, so they're not going to readily dissolve once they have formed. They tend to be a little bit on the acidic side, and they interact with that water and whatever else hangs out inside their structure in pretty interesting ways. You can subject a zeolite mineral to a moderate amount of heat, and it will lose all of its water and change nothing else about its structure or chemistry. And the process is reversible. They can absorb water again later. This is kind of weird. Usually, if we see, some part of a crystal's chemical formula disappear, it becomes a new mineral. And zeolites have a little bit of flexibility in this. They can also interact with certain kinds of metal ions and substitute or give or release them. Sometimes they'll hang out in those little channels or micropores, and other times they will, substitute for other stuff in their structure. And that gives us kind of a messy range of chemistries that show up in the zeolite group. And this kind of flexibility, I think, is really key to understanding what they do. So, as tectosilicates, as framework silicates, they're going to help us build the structures of our lives. Tectosilicates are also really lightweight and durable. So some of the zeolite group we might understand as having this kind of lightness, this high consciousness or high vibe energy, as a lot of folks will say, that really elevates us, but maintains the integrity of that state of being. The fact that they are microporous, we actually use them for a lot of important industrial um, processes as kinds of, we'll say, filters and sponges. That porosity allows them to selectively absorb certain things and reject others. And so, energetically, if we want to purify, to stabilize, to draw things out from our environment without taking them into ourselves, the zeolite group is a great way to go. Um, and then when we also look at this kind of hydrothermal stability, the fact that they interact with water in pretty interesting ways. For me, water is almost always a glyph that represents our emotional state. It can be the deep unconscious, as well as the really obvious surface level emotions that are just turning away right in front of our eyes. And the zeolite group, because of its ability to draw water out of things or to have water drawn out of it without any big structural changes, represents our ability to kind of take a step back from our emotions and have a sense of stillness and space that enables us to look at things a little bit more objectively. It doesn't change what we feel, but it allows us to maybe not be a victim of our emotions. That's really easy to be in the throes of the moment. So, for that reason, a lot of people will find, as I'm sure you'll hear from my fellow confabbers today, Scolecite to be great for clarity, for clear communication, for a sense of inner peace and stillness. Often when I travel, when I was traveling quite a lot, when it was a new thing for me, I'd take Scolecite with me just to kind of help shut my brain off at the end of the night because, all of those thoughts were moving, changing, growing. And it has this ability to kind of cleanse our state of consciousness, to purify our thoughts by helping us kind of put things in order. Now, the challenge with Scolecite is that most of what we've got labeled on the market is not Scolecite, or at least maybe a better way to say that is it is not only Scolecite, because it does form part of this larger, well, I mean, it's the big umbrella of zeolites, the smaller umbrella of the Natrolite group, and then specifically the Natrolite, Mesolite, Scolecite series. So all it takes is a few stray molecules of sodium, and at least some of it is going to be Mesolite or Natrolite. So Mesolite is named because it's in the middle. Meso is Greek for middle or between. So it's in between the other two members on this spectrum. But here is a clue. If you have crystalline scolecite, or something that claims to be at least, if you look at the cross section at the ends, and you might have to magnify this, you may be able to tell which part of the spectrum it leans towards. If you have perfectly rhombic cross sections, you probably do not have scolecite, or at least you don't have scolecite dominant. If they're more like parallelograms, let's see if I can. So if they're kind of like slanty rectangles, so they are longer than they are wide, wider than they are long. I guess just pick which one you want to assign the length to. Then you probably have a scolecite dominant example of it. And it's not a perfect tell because crystals are perfectly imperfect or imperfectly perfect. Take your pick. It means the same thing, right? There's always going to be a little bit of variation. What you'd really need to do is have a goniometer and sit down there and measure our angles and do some math. I'm not requiring that of you, but that can be a telltale sign. And you'll probably notice that in a very large, beautiful spray of so-called scolecite or so-called natrolite, that there's variation because it is probably part of that what we call solid solution, and it's a series of those things. But the good news is that all three of those things being so closely related, their energies are also very closely related. So, yeah, that's my little practical tip on the identification side.
I love watching behind the scenes then, Nicholas, as me and Kyle trying to work out have we got Scolecite here or have we got something else as well? I was really intrigued what you're talking about with the water and how it will absorb water and let it go and without changing its structure. So thinking for people that have raw pieces of Scolecite or Natrolite, um, is it fine to put in water for like crystal care if you're maybe cleansing it or doing not necessarily maybe to make an elixir to drink, but is it fine in water, or do we still need to be careful in those cases?
Um, there's a caveat I'll put here. So theoretically, yes, it should be water stable. However, what kind of base is it attached to? How strongly bonded are the individual crystals? That doesn't really have much to do with the crystal chemistry and more to do with just did the molecules touch or not as it was. Did they, grow over each other? So, I mean, it's insoluble at regular temperatures, pressures, and acidities, but there could also be other stuff in there. So especially when you get some of these like beautifully polished pieces, um, the shimmer that they've got, it can be chatoyant depending on, which angle it's been polished at. That may be improved or hindered if it gets too saturated in water. And also, just because the zeolite group plays very nicely with a lot of other members of the zeolite group, as well as in a lot of other species that get lumped in, sometimes accidentally. For the record, despite what some fairly popular books on the market have said, Apophyllite is not a zeolite and Prehnite is not a zeolite. They frequently occur in the same environments, but they don't belong to this group. They don't meet the requirements. So sometimes those other things can be more sensitive to water. So I would just say, I think a quick rinse is probably fine, but any delicate specimens that you've got, irrespective of what species, whether they're zeolites or not, really delicate things we probably want to cleanse in really delicate manners. So if you've got like one of those little sprays of needle-like crystals that form, hemispherical shapes, maybe don't soak that in water because if those needles get
Mhm.
detached from their matrix, it will be a really sad day, as we were talking about off camera before we started.
Okay, so we won't be taking them down to the river then for sure. Now, Gemma, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. We kind of sent you asked you, what would you like to talk about? And one of the things was Scolecite. We're rapt to have you here, and we'd love to know why Scolecite? Why were you excited to talk about that?
Good question. And hello, everybody. Well, firstly, I looked at the crystals you've already covered, and you've covered some of the most well known and my most loved. So, citrine, smoky. If we're not covering those two, this beauty would definitely be next on the list. And for me, well, okay. So when you asked me that question, I did what I imagine lots of people do. I went to my crystal collection and was kind of like, guys, who wants to be mentioned? And my Scolecite particularly was the one I was focusing on, which for me, when I went from being a crystal collector, loving crystals, to starting to teach about them, the first place I ever went to ask if I could teach in central London, the crystal shop. And I went in, and literally, this crystal was waving, energetically waving at me. So I managed to start the conversation of any chance you would like any crystal courses, classes at any point. And it's been my ally ever since. I absolutely love Scolecite in many forms because, yeah, Nicholas was saying there's lots of different ways. I'm now questioning this one, Nicholas. I think it is Scolecite. It's got Stilbite on the corner, which is gorgeous, like you were saying. But yeah, I think there's other things going on with that one as well.
So tell us a little bit about how you work with this crystal, on a regular basis or when it calls for you, and how other people might use it as well, do you find?
Okay, so for me, Scolecite is the crystal of stillness, of the sound just so people can understand what we mean by that. That's the energy, the frequency it feels like to me. Another way that I visualize this one is it's almost the moment of the Big Bang or the stillness just before. If we could get as silent as any of us could imagine. It feels like that energy. So for me, it's as Nicholas was suggesting as well, if we have to go deep inside and take a moment before we react or find that stillness within us, this is the crystal to work with. I also now teach crystal healing and regularly will suggest to the students that if someone is coming to a session, they're quite stressed, we can see it, maybe they're watching the clock, they've just got here on time. This is the crystal, along with the blue crystals as well, the nervous system crystals, that I would suggest that maybe they give that person just to help relax them or to put in the space that they're working in. So they're holding that space of stillness with its friends. Personally, I think it works really well with Apophyllite and Stilbite as well to kind of create a nice, still, calm, healing energy.
Living in a big city like London, do you think this is a perfect crystal that anyone who's constantly surrounded by noise and overstimulation would really benefit from working with in one way or another?
Oh, that's such a good question. Definitely, definitely. Yeah, the contrast, yes, London is amazing. It's very, very dynamic, but it's always we need to find that stillness, don't we? And the nervous system, and I'm sure you guys can resonate, the busier you are, the more you need to make sure that you're coming back to calm and having a moment as well in that calm to connect into your intuition at the same time.
Love it. I noticed when you said at the start, you stood in front of your crystals and asked which one should we talk about or which one should I propose, and Scolecite kind of stood out to you. A
Mhm.
lot of time we find people reach out to us and they're like, well, how do I know what crystal I should have or what should I work with or what one should I wear today? Could you talk a little bit about this process of like people can just stand in front of their crystals and elaborate a little bit on how they reach out and kind of go, pick me today?
Yeah, so if I'm teaching crystal healing and crystals in general, why we would want to work with crystals, why crystals are energy tools, I'll always start by explaining it's all down to the molecular structure. This is very Nicholas, I know. Molecular structure of the crystal, the formations, the repeating patterns that then mean their frequency is extremely stable and they really offer unique, specific frequencies. That means when we need to pick an energy, the one that, as I phrase, energetically waves at us, we may see them all, but either you're kind of just leaning towards one. Like as soon as you look at them all, there's one that stands out. And we do it in the crystal shops as well, don't we? We're sort of looking through the shop, there's all these beautiful energies, but there'll be one. And that's normally because it has the energy that you need. You're resonating with it because it has what you need in that moment. So I was asking the crystals who would like to speak, who wants to be featured, and that resonance was kicking in.
I love that. And that's a simple thing everyone can do at the start of each
Mm.
day, just to, yeah, it's almost as though do it at the start of the day and then you'll know by the end of the day possibly why you chose that crystal, wouldn't you?
Yes, yes. If you do that, who do I need today? And it's the same, anything intuitive, isn't it? You may not know in that moment why you need that energy, but the day will reveal itself. And if you ask in the morning, then if there is something that's going to come up, you kind of self-soothe ahead of time, don't you? It's like, oh, that's why I needed it. But actually, that issue is not as hard or difficult as it might have been because I've already got the right energies with me in that moment.
I love that. I love that. Now,
Mm.
Paul, you and I are pretty lucky that we live in a bit of a smaller city, and some people call it a bit quiet or boring or that kind of thing. I think I love the peace, and that's why we're both here. But how do you find Scholar really beneficial for you in your life?
For me, I will definitely touch on the fact that it brings a level of peace and serenity and all of that. For me, I want to share about the fact that we, as seekers of all the things spiritual and magical and wonderful and all of that good stuff, the ideal thing is like to go on a retreat, to escape, to find that peace, to connect out in nature on another country, in an island somewhere where you have nothing but time and space. For me, Scholarsight is bring the retreat to you. Bring the retreat home, bring the retreat to your everyday life, and allow yourself to incorporate that level of peace and serenity into small ways every day. In one of those ways, I am currently with my little cat one of my cats has decided to join the session as another guest. One of my favorite ways to bring peace at the end of every day is to soothe with one of my pets, whichever one I can harness and pat and get to give me a cuddle. The idea of going on retreat, and as someone who has gone overseas to teach a retreat, as well as gone and escaped on retreat myself, it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's so much fun and it's great and it just has such a freeing thing, but it's so not practical, right? It's not something that we can all do. It's very rarely something we can afford. And to be able to bring that sense of peace and serenity into your home space in small ways makes a big, big difference. I've touched on this before. Small bits of meditation, as often as you can, makes a really, really big difference. But for me, the Scolecite, Zeolite family really has this ability to bring this immediate sense of just stop, take a moment, take a breath, take a second, give yourself that space. You deserve it. It's not a luxury. Like the idea of going on a retreat is a luxury, right? Having peace seems like a luxury. No, having peace and serenity at home is not a luxury. It's a necessity to getting through life, right? When we are more peaceful, when we are more serene, more relaxed, we can deal with whatever life throws at us. We can tackle everything with more clarity. We feel less shaken by the waves that hit us. And this is where I think Scolecite really enables us to incorporate that easily, because it works so strongly, so quickly, and so clearly. It allows us to give ourselves 10 minutes to drink a cup of tea in the morning before we start our day, in the courtyard, in our backyard, in nature, instead of in front of our screen trying to get ready, right? How about making sure one day a week you have a long bath with salt and your crystals around and some essential oils and some Enya playing in the background and a glass of red wine, whatever makes you happy. How about you make time to read that book? How about you go for a walk along the beach? You go to the park. So many of these things cost nothing, right? So many of these things are free to us. All we have to do is create the time. And I think that's the key, is knowing that you're not too busy to create time for yourself. When you can have time, you have more peace, you have more serenity. Life is easier, it's more relaxing, right? These beautiful polished pieces, super easy, put it in your pocket, have it as a tangible thing to remind you throughout the day as you need to. One of my first pieces, this is the remnants of a pendulum. There was a quartz ball on the end of this, the Scolecite on the end. I have broken dozens of pendulums. I don't use them anymore because I do not need to work with them. But Scolecite was 15 years ago when I was first working with that pendulum, like find peace, find space, find connection. And for me, it has enhanced, deepened, and expanded my connection with my spirit guides and my higher self. I find all of that connection so much easier because of the deep work that I've done with the Zeolite family. I find I have it dotted around my house. Like it just brings peace kind of wherever you put it. So it's a really lovely stone to have kind of wherever you need it, the living room, the bedroom, your peaceful space here. I find it just brings it in for us so easily. And I think if you're someone that maybe struggles with that stopping, that slowing down, that giving yourself permission, that actually allowing yourself to stop and knowing that it's an okay thing, I think Scolecite might be a really useful and helpful tool. And I also find if you want to, as someone who is like highly undiagnosed ADHD, I really struggle to sit down, quiet, meditate. This is a stone that with a couple of others, I can do long lay down, sit down meditations by myself, an hour or so. And that's something I don't do often. I pair it with Apophyllite. I pair it with blue lace agate. I pair it with hemimorphite. And I often pair it with something like calcite, something like clarifying like that I find really useful. And that sort of combination is really deepening of that meditative state. It really allows the full mind, body, spirit to soften and calm in a way that allows that flow to come through with a lot of ease. And this is really funny that I'm speaking about this and talking about this in this way with this cat on my lap who never sits on my lap, like ever. he never actually just sits on my lap calmly. So this is actually really, really funny that as we're talking about this chap has decided, yes, that's his paw, that he wants to actually chill out enough to relax and enjoy the session too.
The Scolecite obviously works well for humans and for cats as well. Kyle, you're kind of becoming our grid guy in our crystal confabs. What I notice about Scolecite, obviously with the raw pieces, you get these beautiful like lines and kind of the energy ebbs and flows up and down it. A lot of time when we're making grids, we might use quartz or something to direct energy. Have you ever used or would you recommend using Scolecite in certain grids as well?
I can highly recommend. That's exactly what I have Scolecite in a couple of my grids for. So these two pieces specifically, I have directing inwards. They're actually in a yin yang balance grid that I have. So I have a grid that has onyx, black obsidian, and Issua stone with white quartz, Scolecite, and selenite. It's a really beautiful balance of energy that I really love to sit with when I need to find a little bit of light and dark balance. I find it is great if you want a grid to expand. Now, rutilated quartz, I would say, is your other stone or rutile or hematite. It really helps with expansion of energy. I find that is more on the physical plane of what we're trying to do as well as spiritually, whereas Scolecite really helps the spiritual mental side expand and open up in a way that helps us to receive more and open up to more. So if you're creating a grid that's trying to create more expanse of integration of information and what we know and what you can understand, I would highly recommend incorporating a piece with the intention to draw in, weirdly enough, because as you draw it in, it will expand.
Mm. For those of the regular watchers or listeners to the confab, I'd really encourage you to start listening and paying attention to what happens to all of us when we talk about different crystals. I don't know if you've noticed this week, but I've been sitting here kind of listening to the other three talk a bit, and we're all getting really peaceful and talking a lot slower. There are episodes like the carnelian and the garnet where we're actually getting really quiet, tripping over our words because we can't talk quick enough. And that really shows you how just being around and tuning into the crystal can really help. And I guess what I wanted to share kind of echoes a bit what Gemma and Kyle have said. I find this, it's interesting that you mentioned blue lace agate, Kyle, because I would find to describe this to someone who hasn't worked with Scolecite, a high octave of blue lace agate. I love blue lace agate. The key word that comes in is like gentleness, and this is like gentleness to the next level in that way. One thing I was noticing as I was listening to everyone talk is I became really conscious of my breathing, and I'm a shallow breather, but it starts to deepen. And I find a really beautiful thing if you need to just chill out is actually focusing on your Scolecite and almost allowing your breath to ebb and flow with the crystal as you run your eyes or gently run a finger along a crystal or something like that can bring in a really meditative state as well. Now, last week we talked about smoky quartz and I talked about the Earth Star chakra. And what I find Scolecite to be really great for is for the corresponding chakra above our crown, which is known as the Soul Star chakra. Now, how does this vary from the crown chakra? The crown chakra connects you to your soul purpose, what you're here to do. But what I find Scolecite and the Soul Star chakra do is they connect us to all the guides, all the angels, all the animal totems, our ancestors, and all that type of thing. Almost as though you can imagine this reaching out into the heavens to the other realms and then bringing that in. As we breathe, we expand out and then we draw that guidance in. So I think sometimes as spiritual people, and I may have touched on this last week as well, we are occasionally feeling a bit black sheepish, feeling a little bit alone. And I find Scolecite not only brings us peace in our environment, but it can also bring us solace and comfort, and as it connects us to guides, gods, angels, animal totems, and that on other realms as well. So it can be a really great one for connection through that way and working with the Soul Star chakra. A really simple way to do that is lay down, chill out, and pop it around 30 centimeters above the head and just almost allow it, like Kyle was talking about with the grids, to be that conduit where it directs that guidance in and out. And I do find that Scolecite almost has this two-way street. Almost as we must breathe in and breathe out, it will allow us to stretch out and connect with the realms. but also bring that wisdom in as well. And I know, Gemma, when we were chatting previously as well, you're saying that, this could also be really good, not just for the here and now, but even for that Akashic kind of record aspect as well, yeah?
Definitely, yes. What I was explaining before is very much how I personally work with and explore Scolecite, but understanding how others I know work with it, they always come back to the idea of the Akashic records, the frequencies of everything that exists. And I separately teach people to connect to the records. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. The next time I worked with Scolecite, I was like, yes, this is the same energy. It feels very similar to when I open and access the records. For me, that feels very expansive. Normally, the space I'm in feels a bit lighter, brighter. The energies go to the head a little bit, all of the stuff you'd expect. Sometimes that little tingle on the top of the head as the crown chakra's doing its thing. So, yeah, I would say this is definitely a crystal that's a bridge to help people access. That'd be the sixth plane. So it's the Akashic Records plane. It's also the plane that's got the laws of the universe, sacred geometry. And I like you were saying, Adam, it will be able to bring that in so you can access that information.
I know Akashic Records are something a lot of people in the spiritual circles are interested in, but we haven't talked about it much on the confab. Obviously, Scolecite would be great if you wanted to do Akashic Record work. Are there any
Mm.
other crystals that are kind of favorites in that realm as well?
Oh, good question. So, like you were saying, anything that connects you to the soul star for sure. And then the next one up, when you cover that one, if you haven't already, a stellar gateway, anything that's very high vibe will help bring the information in. Um, and then the other way of doing it is picking crystals that match the kind of information that you want to connect to. So if you're going to the ancient realms, if you're connecting to Egypt, Lemuria, Atlantis, you can definitely use crystals as a bridge just so that information reaches you more easily. But often when I'm teaching, good old Labradorite for just that little bit where you kind of know, because with the Akashic Records, it's such high vibe information. You normally need the causal chakra supporting you as well, just so the intensity of the information can get to the crown without you getting a headache. If you're new to the work, it can feel a bit like there's a lot of information trying to get access to the third eye. What I found with people, if they've got a Labradorite and they're trying, the information is there, but they're not quite getting it, pick up the Labradorite and that allows it in. It's like a nice, as humans like tools, don't we? And we like that. It's like a button that if you press it, you touch that crystal, the information comes through.
I love that. That's awesome information. Nicholas, we've talked
Mhm.
a lot about pairing Scolecite with different crystals. Is there any other pairings that you really like with Scolecite?
Yeah, so I think it's a really great one to connect with the barrel group. So I think, if we're working on that kind of inner peace and stillness part of it, aquamarine or goshenite or colorless beryl is a great option. If we want to lend a greater understanding of our emotional state, we could work with morganite. If we need to kind of soften and soothe and nourish, and maybe emerald if we're more on the kind of transformational side. And then other members of the zeolite group at large. So you could maybe have something like Hewlandite or Chabazite or Thompsonite or Natrolite or Mesolite or Pectolite, including Larimar. There's so many, I mean, more than 100, as I mentioned earlier, zeolites that all play really nicely with it. But since all of these being those kind of expansive energies that kind of up and out kind of vibe they tend to bring to us, it is nice to also throw a grounding stone in the mix, particularly if you find yourself either very sensitive to energies as a whole, or if you tend to be the kind of person, whether or not we like to admit it, where you go for those high vibe, high consciousness crystals as a sort of spiritual escapism. We still got to be in body to exist. You are in one now if you're listening to the confab, I'd wager. So having a grounding stone so you can be present, return safely, and also integrate what you've learned is really useful. And that can be your grounding stone of choice. I think that it's nice to have more than one option because it gives you the ability to kind of sit it alongside your need in the moment. But one that I find that structurally works really well with zeolite minerals is shungite because of its hollow framework fullerene molecules. While being really carbon rich and grounding, it's as if it kind of facilitates the conversation between those of us in organic carbon-based bodies and those of us who are in not organic crystal-based bodies.
Nicholas, I'm disgusted that you're so assuming that only mortal humans are listening to us and all the other realms aren't tuning into the confab every week as well. I love that we've got all these kind of crystal combinations. You know, one thing I love doing is to combine it with different essential oils as well. One oil I find works really well with Scolecite is known as Melissa. Now, Melissa is if you're going essential oil shopping, you'll notice that it has a higher price tag, which is quite shocking because we can all go down to the nursery and buy a lemon balm plant, which gives us Melissa essential oil for, a few dollars or a few pounds type of thing. But what you find is there's only a little bit of essential oil in these plants in the leaves, so you need a large mass, and that's why the oil is so expensive. Now, Melissa was given its name after a kind of a honeybee goddess who helped raise Zeus, the god, and it's an amazing essential oil for helping to resuscitate us. In fact, a 16th century physician, I think his name was Paracelsus, believed that one drop of Melissa water could bring someone near death back to life. And it's kind of like the oil that when you're feeling low in energy, there's no hope, you're losing faith, that it almost opens up the heavens and brings the light back into your life. And I find this is a really nice one where it shows, just like Kyle was saying, that we don't need to do all these big things to find peace. It's little things. And Melissa teaches us that powerful oils can come from small plants and powerful things can come from just small actions as well. So I find the lessons of this plant and of this crystal work really beautifully as well. So I hope that everyone's really enjoyed learning a little bit more about this high vibration, peaceful crystal. Gemma, I'd love you to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, bit of shameless self-promotion, what you do, how they can find out a bit more about you, and whereabouts in the UK, if someone's in the UK, where they might be able to hunt you down in a good
Oh,
way.
thank you. In a good way, in a
Yes.
good way, yes. Okay, so yeah, I'm based in the UK, in London. If anybody wants to find me, I'd look for my website, which is the Crystal Mystery School, or my social is Crystal Mystery School. Otherwise, if you want to try a few new crystal books, I've got three. I've got the Crystal Apothecary, Your Crystal Plan, and the Crystal Almanac.
I'm interested in the crystal plan. Tell us a little bit more about that one.
So the crystal plan, it honors the fact that crystals work very, very well with the chakras, as I know, Adam, you clearly love as well. And it explores the fact, depending on how the energies flow through the chakras, we're looking at different parts of our lives. So the energy running up connects to our emotional body, the energies running down are how we manifest, and then the placement of the chakras is good for the physical body. So I've ended up writing a book that's a little bit like, did you guys have the books where it's pick your path? You're like, what are you gonna do next? I've kind of wrote a crystal book like that. So firstly, they have to pick what they're focusing on right now. Is it physical, emotional, or spiritual? And then I show them how to pick crystals. There's literally pages of crystals, just the images, so they can practice picking the crystals. And then we journey through what that means, what crystal is what crystal they need, and therefore, if it was physical, how to work with it, if it was emotional, or if it was spiritual.
I
So
love
it's a
that.
little,
I love that. And remember that below all of our episodes, we have all our details, and we'll pop Gemma's down there so you can hunt down her books and find out about the Crystal Mystery School as well. So one thing I love about Scolecite is its beautiful, peaceful energy that you've heard each of us echo in our own different ways today, and how I think, as we create more peace by working with this crystal, we can bring people together, just as we have done today in 3 different time zones. We've managed to do it perfectly. So thank you for everyone for joining us on this confab, wherever you may be in this world. Hopefully you've got some Scolecite or we've whet your appetite to go and get some. We'll be back very, very soon with another confab and another gift from Mother Earth. Until then, take care and blessed be.